Hello coin lovers, and welcome back to the Expensive Coins History channel. These two coins from Switzerland look completely normal, but if you find one, it could be worth more than your entire yearly salary. Before we go any further, take a second right now and hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to hear might completely change the way you look at the coins sitting quietly in your drawer, your wallet, or even an old jar in your home. Most people ignore them. Smart people investigate them, and a very small number of people profit from them. Now imagine this. You're cleaning out an old box. Nothing special. Just everyday clutter collected over years. Receipts, papers, maybe a few foreign coins from a forgotten trip. You almost throw them away. Almost. But something makes you pause. You pick up a small silver-colored coin. It feels ordinary. Light. Worn. No gold shine. No diamonds. No obvious sign that it could be anything more than loose change. But what if that single moment, that small hesitation, is the difference between losing everything and discovering something worth over $100,000? Because that's exactly where our story begins. The 1/2 franc 1982 coin from Switzerland is not the kind of coin that demands attention. It doesn't scream wealth. It doesn't look rare. In fact, millions of people have seen coins just like it and never gave them a second thought. That's what makes it so dangerous and so powerful. Switzerland is known for precision, clean design, stability. Their currency reflects that. The 1/2 franc coin carries a design that has remained largely unchanged for decades. On one side, you see the graceful image of Helvetia, the symbolic female figure representing the Swiss nation. Calm, strong, timeless. Around her are stars, representing unity and identity. On the other side, the denomination is simple and clear, surrounded by a wreath that feels almost understated. Nothing about it looks extraordinary. And yet, that's exactly why people overlook it. Because rarity doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes, it hides inside normality. The year 1982 is where things begin to shift. On paper, it was just another year of minting coins. Nothing dramatic. No major redesign. No official announcement that anything unusual had happened. But collectors, the kind of people who study coins with almost forensic attention, began to notice something subtle, something different. And in the world of coin collecting, subtle differences can mean everything. It could be the metal composition, a slight variation during production, a minting inconsistency that slipped past quality control, a limited batch that was never meant to stand out, but did. Now here's where it gets interesting. Most 1/2 franc coins from 1982 are completely normal, worth exactly what they say. Half a franc, nothing more. But a very small number, a tiny fraction, are not normal at all. And those are the coins that have shaken the collector market. These rare variants didn't become famous overnight. They moved quietly, passed from one collector to another, studied, verified, debated, and slowly, their reputation began to grow. Not because they were flashy, but because they were scarce. True scarcity is not about age alone. It's about how many exist and how many people want them. And when those two forces collide, value explodes. Think about it like this. If something exists in large numbers, it doesn't matter how old it is. It stays common. But if something exists in extremely limited numbers, even if it looks ordinary, it becomes a target, a chase, a prize. And that's exactly what happened with this coin. Over time, stories began to surface. Someone finding one in a collection, another spotting a rare detail that others missed, a dealer quietly paying far more than expected, an auction where a seemingly simple coin shocked everyone in the room. And suddenly, the narrative changed. This was no longer just a coin. It was a hidden opportunity. Now let's talk about the psychology behind this, because this is where most people fail. When people look at coins, they look for obvious signs of value. Gold color, large size, old dates, something that visually signals importance. But the real money, the serious money, is often found in coins that don't look valuable at all. That's why so many of these rare 1/2 franc 1982 coins slip through the cracks. They get spent, forgotten, ignored. And every time that happens, the number of surviving rare pieces becomes even smaller, which makes the remaining ones even more valuable. Now imagine being the person who recognizes one. Imagine holding a coin that everyone else would dismiss, but you know better. That's the difference between a casual observer and a true collector mindset. Details matter. Edges matter. Weight matters. Even the smallest variation in engraving can turn a worthless coin into something extraordinary. And here's something most people never think about. Coins travel. They move across borders, through hands, across decades. A Swiss coin from 1982 might not even be in Switzerland anymore. It could be sitting in a collection in another country. It could be mixed in with coins from completely different currencies. It could even be in your possession right now without you realizing it. That's not an exaggeration. That's reality. Because history doesn't stay in one place. It moves. And sometimes, it ends up exactly where no one expects it to be. Now let's go deeper. The reason collectors are willing to pay extraordinary amounts for specific coins isn't just about rarity. It's about story. It's about the idea that this small object has survived time, passed through unknown hands, and carries with it a silent history. And when you combine that with rarity, you get something powerful. Something people compete for. Something people are willing to spend serious money to own. The 1/2 franc 1982 coin is one of those rare cases where everything aligns. Subtle differences, limited availability, growing demand, and most importantly, widespread ignorance among the general public. That last part is key, because as long as most people don't recognize its value, opportunities continue to exist. But once awareness spreads, once more people start checking their coins, once collectors begin actively hunting, everything changes. Supply tightens, prices rise, and the window of opportunity begins to close. This is why timing matters, not just in collecting, but in awareness. The earlier you understand something, the greater your advantage. Now let's bring this back to reality. You're not a museum. You're not a professional dealer. You're someone who might have coins lying around without thinking twice about them. And that's exactly why this matters. Because valuable coins don't come with labels. They don't announce themselves. They don't tell you, I'm worth thousands. You have to discover that yourself. And that discovery, that moment of realization, is what changes everything. Think about the emotional impact of that. 1 second, it's just a coin. The next second, it's something that could pay bills, change plans, or open new possibilities. That shift, that transformation, is what makes coin collecting so addictive for some people. It's not just about money. It's about the hunt, the uncertainty, the possibility that something ordinary could become extraordinary. And the 1/2 franc 1982 coin represents that idea perfectly. It's quiet, unassuming, easy to ignore. But for those who know what to look for, it becomes something else entirely. Something rare, something valuable, something worth paying attention to. And now we reach the moment that everyone waits for. The value. Because everything we've talked about leads to this single point. That's not hype. That's the reality of rarity meeting demand. But here's the truth you need to understand. Not every 1982 coin is worth that. Only specific rare versions. Only those with the right characteristics. Which means the real question isn't just about value. It's about identification. And that is where knowledge becomes power. Because the difference between a worthless coin and a 6-figure coin can come down to details so small that most people would never notice them. That's the gap. That's the opportunity. And that's why stories like this matter. Because they open your eyes to possibilities that were always there, but never recognized. So the next time you see a simple coin, don't rush past it. Don't assume it's nothing. Because sometimes, nothing is exactly where everything is hidden. Now imagine this. After everything you've just heard, after realizing that a simple 1/2 franc coin could quietly hold life-changing value, you start looking at every coin differently. You become more aware, more curious, more focused. And just when you think you understand how this hidden world works, another coin appears. Another ordinary-looking piece of metal. Another quiet opportunity. The 1 franc 1970 coin from Switzerland. At first glance, it feels familiar. Same clean Swiss precision. Same calm, balanced design language that doesn't try to impress, but somehow carries a quiet authority. On one side, you again see the symbolic figure of Helvetia, standing with confidence, representing stability and tradition. On the other side, the denomination is clear, surrounded by a simple wreath. Nothing flashy, nothing loud, nothing that would make an average person stop and think twice. And that is exactly why this coin is so dangerous to overlook. Because just like the previous coin, its true story is hidden beneath the surface. Now think about the year 1970. a time long before digital tracking, before online marketplaces, before instant global communication. Coins produced during that era traveled freely. They moved from hand to hand, across cities, across countries, often without any record of where they went or who held them. And that creates something very important: uncertainty. And in the world of collecting, uncertainty creates opportunity. Because when no one is paying attention, rare pieces can hide in plain sight for decades. The 1 franc 1970 coin is a perfect example of this. For most people, it's just another old coin, maybe slightly more interesting because of its age, but still, nothing special. But for collectors, for those who have spent years studying patterns, minting behavior, and historical inconsistencies, this coin tells a very different story. Somewhere during its production, something unusual happened. Not something obvious, not something officially announced, but something subtle enough to slip through unnoticed, yet significant enough to matter decades later. It could be a variation in strike quality, a difference in metal composition, a slight shift in engraving alignment. These are not things you see at a glance. These are things you discover only if you know exactly what you're looking for. And that's where most people lose the opportunity, because they never look closely enough. Now here's what makes this coin even more fascinating. Over the years, many of these coins were used in everyday transactions. They were spent, exchanged, carried in pockets, dropped into jars. Some were scratched, some were worn down, some were lost completely. And every time one of those rare variants was damaged or disappeared, the number of high-quality surviving pieces decreased, which quietly increased the value of the remaining ones. This is how rarity evolves, not just from limited production, but from survival. And survival is unpredictable. Some coins get preserved perfectly in collections. Others barely make it through time. And occasionally, a rare piece survives in near-perfect condition, completely unnoticed. That's the kind of discovery that changes everything. Now let's talk about the mindset shift again, because this is where real viewers start to transform. Before, a coin was just a coin. Now, every coin is a question. Every detail becomes important. You start noticing edges, weight, shine, small imperfections, tiny design differences that you would have ignored before. And suddenly, you're no longer just looking. You're analyzing. That shift alone puts you ahead of most people. Because while others continue to ignore what's right in front of them, you begin to see possibility. Now imagine holding a 1 franc 1970 coin in your hand. It doesn't feel special. It doesn't look expensive. But you pause. You examine it. You compare it. And you realize something is different. That moment, that exact second, is where everything changes. Because the difference between ignorance and awareness is not luck. It's attention. And attention creates opportunity. Now let's go deeper into why collectors are willing to pay extraordinary amounts for something like this. It's not just about owning a coin. It's about owning a moment in history that almost disappeared. It's about finding something that very few people recognize. It's about the challenge, the hunt, the satisfaction of discovering what others missed. And most importantly, it's about exclusivity. Because in a world where almost everything cannot be duplicated. It cannot be recreated. It either exists or it doesn't. And when something exists in extremely limited numbers, demand becomes intense. Serious collectors don't hesitate. They compete. They push prices higher. They do whatever it takes to secure something that may never appear again. That's exactly what has happened with certain rare variants of the 1 franc 1970 coin. Quietly, over time, its reputation has grown. Not in public headlines. Not in mainstream conversations. But in private circles. Among collectors. Among experts. Among people who understand what they're looking at. And when something gains that kind of attention, its value begins to move in ways that surprise everyone else. Now let's bring everything together. You've seen how two completely normal-looking coins can hide extraordinary potential. You've seen how rarity doesn't always come from appearance, but from subtle details. You've seen how time, movement, and survival shape value in ways most people never consider. And now, we arrive at the moment that truly defines everything. The value of the rare 1 franc 1970 coin. Collectors have been willing to pay as high as $189,000. Take a second to process that. A coin that could be sitting unnoticed somewhere, worth more than what many people earn in years. That's the power of hidden rarity. That's the power of awareness. But just like before, not every coin is worth that amount. Only the rare variants. Only the right versions. Only those with the specific characteristics that separate them from the rest. And that brings us to the most important takeaway of all. Value is not always visible. It's discovered. It's understood. It's recognized by those who are willing to look deeper than everyone else. So the next time you come across an old coin, don't dismiss it. Don't assume it's nothing. Because now you know better. Now you understand that even the most ordinary objects can carry extraordinary potential. And sometimes, the smallest discovery can lead to the biggest change. So keep your eyes open. Stay curious. And remember, the opportunity is already out there. You just have to recognize it.